Greetings and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review of Game of Thrones Season 4, Episode 6, The Laws of God, Gods and Men. This, by far, is my favorite episode this season so far. I absolutely loved it. I think it was one of the rare cases, in fact, it might be one of my favorite episodes of the whole series. It's one of the rare cases where every storyline in the episode from start to finish is just really solid and exciting. So we get to see, finally get to see Stannis doing something, and this is so cool because for a season and a half I've been really bored with his storyline because he's just been sitting around Dragonstone, going woe is me, but finally he's at the bank and to see Davos, speaks up and pitches this thing to the Iron Bank. Now personally, I had thought, because there has been a lot of talk already about the Iron Bank and how if you don't pay off your debts, they will fund your enemies. And from what Tywin is saying, it sounds like he's not doing a very good job of paying off his debts. He found out last week that the Lannisters are basically going broke and they can't really afford to pay off all their debts. That's why they're trying to make all these alliances so they can pay off their debts. I think they were sincere in when they didn't want to fund Stannis at first, but Davos made a really good point about Tywin and how after he's dead, the people who take over aren't really trustworthy, whereas Stannis is, and when they show him his fingers, that sort of revamp the thing that Davos is more likely to get their money back. But I think definitely the fact that they haven't been paying their debts off as quickly as they could was probably a huge factor in why the Iron Bank seemed to change their mind so easily. They haven't completely gave up on the Lannisters, but they're going to fund Stannis too as a backup. And if Stannis, let's say, like if he were to become king, then he would most likely have to pay back Tywin's debt as well, maybe. There's yet to be any mention of the Wall this season, and at the last episode of the previous season, they talked about the White Walker threat and how Melisandre said, it's why they didn't execute Davos. Melisandre said, that the War of the Five Kings was nothing, and what they really need to do is take care of the threat of the White Walkers and go to the Wall. Yeah, you haven't got any talk about that this season. For the most part, they've kind of been implying that they just want to put Stannis back on the throne. So they're kind of being kind of vague on where Stannis is going to go from here, or what his next move is going to be. So that'll be interesting to see that. Okay, so then the next scene after that is the Greyjoys going to rescue Theon, but to find out that he's not Theon anymore, he's Reek, and he doesn't want to go with them. This is awesome. I love this as well. It was cool. I've been waiting a really long time to see this, and it's cool to finally see Yara go up against Ramsay. I was really excited about this, but there was something, this storyline featured something about the episode which I didn't like, and it seemed like Yara gave up too easily to me. It's like, after Theon bit her hand and she ran off, she also seemed to run off a bit too easily just because Ramsay was opening up some dog cages. I mean, Ramsay was shirtless, he didn't even have armor on. I think if they put their minds to it, they could have taken him. But I suppose they might have been worried about more guards coming, because it wasn't their plan to take over the whole castle. They just wanted to do a stealth attack and rescue Theon. The fact that Theon wasn't being cooperative made their job that more difficult. But it seems to me, and I kept expecting Yara to do this, that she should have just knocked him out, hit him on the head and dragged him out, because it was obvious that he wasn't cooperating, so she would have had to force him out, would have been the way. I mean, from that scene, if I were her, my guess would be is that he's become delirious with torture and he doesn't know who he is, what's going on anymore. I don't think she's that stupid where she was too dumb to realize that that Theon's totally fucked up now, and that what she should have done is just knocked him out dragged him back to Pike and then took him back and deprogrammed him. Maybe they could hire one of those people who deprogram people after they've been brainwashed by cults. But but yeah, but instead she just gives up. You know, after this big speech, you hear her give this big speech on the boats on the way there about how they they defigured my brother. It's just like them defiguring you. And then the next thing you know, no, my brother's dead. Fuck him. Yeah, so I didn't really like that, but it's interesting what they're setting it up for, because Ramsey obviously brainwashed Theon very well, and now he's, completely thinks he's Reek. But now he's asking Reek to pretend to be Theon, even though he really is Theon, in order to infiltrate the Ironborn, probably at Moat Cailin. I saw several reviews where people got this wrong, or they couldn't figure out where they were going. But if you think to episode 2, Roose Bolton, Ramsay's father, told him if he took Moat Cailin that he would make Ramsay a full Bolton. So that's like Ramsay's biggest goal. And Moat Cailin is the sort of area where it's like the gateway to the north. So if you need to go north, it's like a thin little line you have to go through Moat Cailin to get there. And at the moment, the Ironborn control it, so that's why Roose Bolton said he had to be smuggled back into his own lands, because he was in, the Riverlands for the war with Robb, but after he, killed them all and betrayed him, he had to get back north, but the Ironborn blocked his only route, so that he had to, smuggle himself back into his homelands, which he was really pissed about, so he wanted Ramsay to go down and take it, so that's what he's going to use Theon to do. Am I the only one who thinks this is a really bad idea? It seems to me pretty obvious that if Theon, if Reek pretends to be Theon, that he's going to remember being Theon, and he's actually going to brainwash. That's like the best way to cure the brainwashing. If I was thinking of any way, what way can I cure brainwashing? Well, let's pretend to be the person that you really are. So that seems to me like Ramsay's being an idiot. It seems like that's the dumbest thing he could possibly do. It seems like it's inevitable if he does that Theon is going to remember that he is Theon. But I guess we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. But yeah, it doesn't. If I was Ramsay, I wouldn't think of that. So next we move on to Daenerys, whose storyline I always love, even though she's not up to that much this year, and a lot of her scenes are just dialogue. It's still very interesting dialogue, and we get to see the dragons going all crazy. This is really interesting, because when in episode 3, when she or was it 4? Yeah, it was episode 4. She took over Marine, and she crucified all the lords. I knew this was going to come back to bite her on the ass when I first saw the episode. I'm like, when Barristan Selmy was advising her against it. I can't remember this guy's name, but I did see him before in episode 3 when Dany was at the wall and her their champion was fighting Dario. They did show some shots of this guy, so I think he's gonna play an important role later on in the season, and I think he's gonna be a thorn in Dany's side. I think no good will come out of this. But as for Daenerys just sitting around having like 214 whatever meetings with these people, I thought that shouldn't she be taking care of business in Astapor and Yunkai, because they've already, all the freed slaves are slaves again, they've been enslaved again. You think that would be a priority to her rather than listening to goat herders whine about their problems? But I don't know, we'll see. Maybe she'll send some other people to take care of that stuff. I don't know. Okay, so we'll move on to the next storyline, which is we see the small council. And Tywin's actually, in my last week's episode I talked about Tywin, how he wasn't really actually concerned about Daenerys, that his big concern was the Iron Bank Bravos. I don't take that back. I still think that's the case. Although I think his concern about Daenerys has gone up since season 3 when he told Joffrey he didn't care about it. I think he is starting, because he's a smart guy, he can see that she's becoming queen of a city and this has the potential. You know, he's not freaked out, obviously, but he could see that down the line this had the potential to bite him in the ass. So I think he's going to try to nip this in the bud. So he tells Mace Tyrell to bring him his pen so he can write some letters. Well, he told first of all it's asked Varys if he could get some spies into Meereen, and so when he's going to write letters, he's going to write letters to Varys' spies in Meereen, and no good can come of this. I'm actually really, really worried about Daenerys now, because every time Tywin starts to write letters, some really bad shit's going to go down. I mean, last time he wrote letters, he basically set up the Red Wedding. We see him writing letters in a couple episodes. Everyone we love is dead. So, and what's really worrisome about this is that they didn't show us what he wrote. So we don't know what he wrote. So the fact that they wouldn't show us makes me think they want it to be a surprise to the audience when it actually happens in Meereen, which makes me think it is going to happen. So some serious shit's going to go down in Meereen, and it won't be good for Daenerys. But it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And then they made a mention of the Hound. It was funny how Varys said, the words "fuck the king" were spoken. It was a bit surprising to me, though, that they didn't mention that Arya was with her, because they had the spies who could see the Hound. You'd think they would at the least mention that he was traveling with a little girl. I mean, maybe these spies aren't wise enough to know who Arya is, or they'd never seen her, so they couldn't recognize her, because it wasn't like she was advertising who she was. But at least you think they would mention that it's strange that the Hound is traveling with a little girl, because he's not really necessarily the fatherly type. So it makes me lose respect for Varys' spies. It makes me think they're not very effective if they leave out such a big detail like that. But obviously, I think it's for plot reasons. They don't want the small council to know that Arya is with the Hound. Then we get a scene with Varys and Oberyn in the council chambers talking. We always get tons of scenes with Varys and talking about power to somebody while looking at the Iron Throne. This is like one of the most cliched tropes they have in the show. But this scene was actually really interesting, because they were talking about, because these are both really good characters, and I get a bit tired of Littlefinger and people like that, but Oberyn's a really interesting guy, so they're really smart and they know what's what. So I actually really liked it. It was another good thing about the episode. So then we'll move on to Tyrion's trial, which was amazing. But first, it started out with all these various people coming out and giving their testimony, and they actually quoted things that Tyrion had said, but they gave it a nice little twist. Yeah, so then we get this nice little scene. Every scene in this episode is awesome, especially, it just gets better and better. And then we get Jaime talking to Tywin, pleading for his brother's life. And then Jaime offers an ultimatum. He says, if you let Tyrion live, I will renounce the King's Guard and become a true Lannister like I want. And practically before he can even finish his sentence, Tywin's like, done. So this really implies that this was Tywin's plan all along. Like, it was kind of like a con artist thing where he didn't want to propose it. He put Jaime in the situation where he knew Jaime would would propose it. And as soon as he did, it's like, sure. So it was a win-win for Tywin once Tyrion was put in trial, because he could at the same time trick Jaime into becoming a Lannister and carrying on the name, and get rid of Tyrion, who he thought was a disgrace to the Lannister family. He doesn't necessarily need to kill him. I don't think, Tywin doesn't have the bloodlust that Cersei does. He just doesn't think he deserves the name Lannister. So sending him to the wall, where he has to renounce all name and title, that's good enough for Tywin. He doesn't dead wall all the same to him. Either way, he's not a Lannister anymore, and that's the main part of his goal. So then, so Jaime comes out, tells Tyrion about the deal. He says, "Keep your mouth shut. Just don't have any more outbursts, and all will be good. You'll be sent to the wall. You'll survive." Now, I heard several opinions online. My opinion about this is, at this point, Tyrion was down. You know, he seemed kind of iffy about the whole thing. He wasn't sure that Tywin would keep his word. But I think for the most part, he was willing to trust Jaime and to just go with it, be sent to the wall. But then they totally fucked up. They overdid. You know, they're piling all this evidence against Tyrion. But they kind of stepped too far with Shay. Now, here's another thing that's been sort of debatable online, is that I heard several theories that Shay was still on Tyrion's side. She's still on Team Tyrion. She was just coerced into giving testimony. I don't think that's the case. I think that she is actually very upset with Tyrion because let's be honest here, Shay's not very smart. She's not a bright bulb. When Tyrion kept trying to tell her over and over again that they were in danger and that she was endangering them in King's Landing by keep making their relationship public, she was really stupid and she wouldn't listen to him. Plus, she was overly jealous. She was constantly, you know, being jealous of Tyrion with any other woman. So when Tyrion said all that stuff to her in episode 2, that she was just a whore, he didn't care about her, obviously he was just saying that to get rid of her. But she's not smart enough to see through that. She actually believed it. Because in essence, it was all of her fears. And she was so jealous, she thought that he just saw her as a whore and that he really wanted Sansa. He was confirming all of her worst fears. So when all of your worst fears seem to be confirmed, you don't really think rationally. Especially if you're not, if you're not that smart like Shay is. So she fully believes that that Tyrion just thinks that she's a whore. So she's really heartbroken and she's really lashing back at him. But I think it's a combination of her being manipulated by Tywin and Cersei, and she's trying to get back to him, at him. I mean, I do think she is being coerced. I think Tywin told her what to say. Obviously, she based the story off of real life. Like, pretty much everything that happened was true, except she gave it a little twist to make Tyrion see bad, right up until the plot of Sansa and Tyrion plotting to kill Joffrey. Obviously, she made that part up. I think this was made very clear in the scene where, after Shay gives her testimony, Tyrion, says, "Shay, please don't." But she says to him, "I'm a whore, remember?" And it's obvious, like, she's saying that to him. She's not saying that to anyone else. I don't know if anyone else in the room can even hear her, but she's obviously really pissed at him. And that was sort of a callback to when Tyrion berated her and said that she was just a whore. So she's throwing that back in his face. So she honestly is very upset with him. Yeah, so that was my take on it. And so basically, Tyrion that was the most heart-wrenching thing for Tyrion, because he really loved her, this whole time, and to say those things to her was one of the hardest things he had to do, and to see that be thrown back in his face in order to be executed, and to see everyone just spit on him and treat him like shit, and all the people he saved at the Battle of Blackwater was just too much for him, so he reached his breaking point. So I don't know if Tyrion, I heard some theories that Tyrion had planned all along to do trial by combat. It could be the case, possibly, but to me it seemed like this was more of a heat of the moment. Like, I think he was planning on just going along with Jaime's plan, but when Shay came out, they just pushed him way too far, and he was like, you know, fuck all of you. And his speech here, it was just amazing. It was one of the best moments in the whole entire series. When he finally, it was such an amazing performance, and then he finally went off, told everyone exactly what he thought of him, and when he said to them, said to Cersei, "I'm glad you're, brutal bastard killed. I should have killed him myself." And then he said to everyone in the room, "I should have poisoned all of you." It was simply amazing. It's like they deserve it, really, if you think about it. They, as much as Tyrion did for everyone, how completely ungrateful they are. But then when he throws that trial for combat, I don't think it was planned. I think that was the heat of the moment. And he threw that back in Tywin's face to piss him off. The shots they had with Tywin looking at Tyrion and Tyrion looking at back, they were like shooting daggers with their eyes. They were so spiteful. You could tell that was Tyrion's way of just saying "fuck you," and it was amazing. That's my review of this episode. I think, the court scene with Tyrion was absolutely amazing. It's cool to see amazing to see Bravos. It was cool to finally see Yara, and to see where Dany's storyline is going. So this whole episode was, I'll hold it up there as one of the best episodes, I'll say. So next week, it looks like we're going to get, I think it'll be more of a setup, especially as far as King's Landing goes. I think we'll get a lot of sort of setup for the big trial by combat. We see Littlefinger and at the Vale, so I think that storyline's going to progress quite a bit, and we'll get more of what's going on with crazy Aunt Liza. Looks like she's going off the wall. And then Arya and the Hound, I think their story is actually going to get a bit interesting next week now the Hound has this huge bounty on him. Alright, so that is my review for The Laws of Gods and Men. Thanks for watching.